Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the eDiscovery channel. Tom O'Connor in New Orleans, Louisiana, and I'm really happy to be joined today by my friend Mike McBride from up the road in Baton Rouge, um,
Indeed.
which, if you talk to the people in New Orleans, is like another country. It's hard to
I,
believe
I
it's like
I hear.
50 miles up the road. You think it was like in another dimension, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, you're New Orleans. Y'all are just different.
oh, yeah, we're just yeah, exactly. Um,
Which I'm wearing a t-shirt that I got in New Orleans, so
there
from
you
the
go. There you
historic New Orleans collection. So
Nice. What museum?
the historic collection, the group of museums that are down in the French Quarter.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
great.
They have a
That's
little
a
gift
great.
shop, picked up my museum
Yeah,
nerd
that's a
shirt.
great.
So
Yeah, that's a great museum.
yeah.
Um, so Mike has, for those of you who don't know him, and if you don't know him, you should. He's got enough blogs to keep you busy all week. He is an M365 expert, at least in my humble opinion. Um, and you're listening to me, so that's the only opinion you're going to get. um, but Mike also has the coolest job title in legal technology. Are you still the M365 Modern Workplace Engineer
I am indeed.
at Bricker Graydon?
Bricker Graydon. Yeah.
Which I always have to make sure I say it right because it's it's interesting. It's really a Midwest firm, right? And
Yeah.
you're sort of the Louisiana outpost. Um,
I am indeed.
yeah, um, and to that end, the reason I've asked Mike to talk with us today is, and I'm just going to let you roll with this. All the changes that have been going on, um, uh, and talked about a lot with Microsoft 365 and eDiscovery and Purview and what they're doing. Uh, I spoke with Greg Buckles the other day. His interview is up on the site. But Greg has a perspective of working with corporate clients and large law firms. So um, Mike Mike works with us down here where the rubber meets the road,
Yeah.
which is often an ugly place to meet, especially in state court. Um, um, so I'm curious of your take. As I said when we were teeing this all up, I was really struck when I spoke with Greg the other day about his statement that really the face of eDiscovery, of M365 eDiscovery, is going to be CoPilot, if it isn't already. Um, and so that's one of the big changes. Um, you expressed little or no surprise at when I asked you about it. So I'm curious on your take on that. Are we, how far along are we? Are we already there? What does that mean in terms, really, the bigger question about the incorporation of AI into the entire process? Because really, that's Copilot is the face of Microsoft AI right now. So, um, you know, as I said to Greg the other day, what in the wide world of sports is going on here?
That was frankly a great phrase. I think that was exactly how many of us feel.
Yeah, there's really just, I mean, I'm you know making light of this to a certain extent, but every call I get about this subject these days is literally, what's going on? Is Purview here? Is Purview going? Is Purview gone? What you know, what's happening with all the stuff? I haven't even learned it the way it was last year, and
And it's changed.
now they're changing it on me,
Well,
and
welcome to Microsoft.
welcome to the wonderful world of Microsoft. And that doesn't even, we still leave our stepsister Teams over here on the side, which nobody knows anything about. So, um, with all of that, it's all yours, Mike. What can you tell us?
So one of the ways that I really, and this goes back to when I used to work with a lot of, when I was a consultant, working for a consulting firm and doing consulting with folks rolling out teams during the pandemic and dealing with e-discovery of teams and all of that stuff. I
Yes.
think one of my favorite ways to explain what Teams was kind of saying, look, you're licensed for the Microsoft 365 environment. That is an entire platform unto itself.
Okay.
Teams is a platform that lives on top of that platform.
On
And
top of
now CoPilot is another platform that lives on top of that platform,
okay,
right? So,
which begs
so
the question: does it coexist with Teams? Is it going to be? Is it also going to be above Teams? Um,
I think it sits side by side with Teams, but they walk hand in hand in a lot of ways. And this is something I was thinking about the other day because I was trying to come up with a way to differentiate the two, right? Because I think AI is sort of this thing that has tentacles into everything, right? So
yeah.
I go to Copilot and I say, look this up for me, and it says, what do you have out there? Like what documents are out there? What emails are out there? I'm going to go look through them and find the information that you're looking for, or draft a email or document that you're based on all the information that you have access to,
Okay.
right? Teams is a little bit different because what Teams does, and I have a hard time explaining this because Teams is its own program and it seems like its own thing, but in a lot of ways, Teams is just the interface to present information to you, right? So yes, there are Teams communications and there are chats and Teams channels and all these things, but a lot of that stuff lives somewhere else. The Teams app is just pulling it in and going, here. Here's all your information. Here's all your communications and your collaborations, other than email. For some reason, I can't look at my email in Teams. I never really understood that.
And let me interrupt and ask this then. Is this, and if this is a gross oversimplification, please feel free to scoff. Um, so is it almost as though M365 for the user is a one person at a time thing, whereas Teams is what you just said. It can be that person, but also all the collaborative efforts that are going on that
Yeah,
that person is involved with. Okay.
yeah, and I
Okay.
think that is as we look forward, and you and Greg talked about it. I think how everything is being pushed to Copilot, right? Mike and I kind of joked with someone the other day and said that whether you like it or not, Microsoft's going to push Copilot down your throat. But it's right. You're not going to
Yeah.
be able to avoid it. It's just going to be there in everything. You could not use it, but you can't not have it. Like it's just going to be everywhere.
So I'm very mindful of it was actually he was answering a question. Bill Gates was here for the Tulane Book Festival several years ago. This is like 3, 4 years ago. Um, and of course, he was talking about books. He's a funny guy because he walks around with a book bag, like a beach bag filled with books for the summer. He reads real books, right? Mr. Technology. But he always has like 7 or 8 books with him. But of course, the question turned to I'm not sure it was even AI at that point. If it was very early. It may have been very early AI because OpenAI and ChatGPT might have first come out, and they had just and then Microsoft had just made their first big investment in OpenAI. Um, and somebody said to him, "So yeah, I know this isn't a book question, but where are you guys going with all this stuff?" And Gates said, "Well, it's early, and I don't, I don't want it's off topic, but he said, look, let me just say, obviously, we made a big monetary investment and we're all in. I think that's where we're going. He said, but here's the thing. It's just so reminiscent of what you just said, or what you just said reminded me of this. He said, look, I don't see it as a separate product. Um, and he was just talking AI. I'm not even sure if Copilot was a thing then.
Mhm.
He said, what I see is us having something that is really just there, and the customer, the client, the consumer, whoever uses it. He said, when you want to use spell check, you don't turn spell check on. Spell check comes on when you open Word or email or whatever. It's just there. It's
Yeah.
part of the thing. And that what you just said reminded me that was clearly in his mind like 5 years ago. Well, Chat GPT probably isn't that old, right? 4 years,
But
whatever.
yeah, and I think that is, what you see when you work with
So now we're getting there.
M365 and Copilot is that, the day the day our firm gave me a Copilot license, it was suddenly everywhere, right? Everywhere I went, and over time, it's just gotten people have kind of joked that it's Clippy, in a way because
Oh,
you need help
oh,
with this, you need help with this, you need help with this, like everywhere.
there's a Wayback Machine moment.
Yeah. So,
Clippy
yeah. In fact, there
with
was
the
a
little cartoon
Clippy.
hands.
Yeah, there was a Clippy statue at the Microsoft conference I was at earlier this year. It was
Really?
kind of fun. Yeah. So it's there, and it's again it's offering to help, and look, Microsoft has invested more money than I can comprehend
Right.
in this.
Right.
They need you to use it, right? That's part of the business plan. I'm not here to say that it's bad, good, one way or the other. I think it is useful in some ways. I think it is overhyped in some ways. I
Yes,
use it. I
but it's
sometimes
there.
run into things and I go, this is terrible. And I sometimes am like, this was really helpful.
But we got to deal with
It's
it,
a
right? It is
technology
what it
tool,
is.
right?
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
like
but
saying, like 10 years ago, 12, whatever, Windows is bad. This Windows stuff really sucks. Well, yeah, get over
you're not going anywhere.
it.
Yeah, as I tell our and I'm in sort of a funny place, which I think kind of gives me a different perspective because I worked in IT, or I worked with eDiscovery for 15 years, but I no longer work in eDiscovery.
Right.
I am actually part of our IT department, and my sole focus is on M365 and Purview and CoPilot. So I am kind of looking at things with my background in eDiscovery and going, huh, this is interesting, and writing about that because it is interesting. Um, but I know Greg talked a lot about like running cases and not having time to test this stuff, and I was like, yeah, I'm not doing that stuff anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is my job.
But that's great because I think for a long time we didn't have, at least in legal, and this is in part of the why so much is flipped over to the corporate side, in my estimation. Legal law firms were often disdainful of IT.
Mhm.
If not disdainful, they certainly didn't value them. Um, and to see that now we're getting true IT investment and attention to these things, um, outside of just a few lawyers who are doing e-discovery, that to me that's a big step forward, and it's
Yeah,
a
no doubt.
big step towards successful implementation too.
No, it really is. And I think one of the things that Greg talked about that I really latched onto, and I thought to myself, he's absolutely right, but it's also only a start, right? Was he talked about having monthly, every month you're going to run these searches in the discovery tool and make sure so nothing's changed, first of all, which yes.
No, that
Among
is
other things, you are absolutely want to do that. But you're also going to sit down once a month with the person in your department, the IT person who's in charge of Purview and M365 and talk to them about what's changing. And I thought that's absolutely true, right? You do from a legal standpoint, and you're right. I have, when I was a consultant, getting the legal team and the IT team to even show up to the same meeting. Oh my God.
yeah, didn't happen,
Yeah.
right? Didn't
Let
happen.
alone talk to one another.
And
And sometimes
most
when we
times,
got them in there, it was like, have you two met? Like,
yeah, who's this guy again? He lives down in the dungeon, right?
yeah.
And that's where people like you and I came in. They would, when push came to shove, they'd go to outside consultants to come in,
Mhm.
and half the time I was just translating. I'm acting
Yeah.
literally as a translator between two sets of people. Um, it just was really astonishing. So yeah, it is good in that sense to see some valuation of IT,
Mhm.
that's necessary. So
Yeah. And I,
I'm sorry. Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say that where I would add on to that is that a lot of folks from e-discovery backgrounds, um, you and Greg talked about the community of people writing about e-discovery, and your audience for this podcast is probably already following you and Doug and Craig Ball and Kelly Twigger and EDRM and ACEDS, right? You guys are all following that content in social media. You're all reading those blogs, and that's fantastic. But what I do, because again, I still follow that stuff because I'm still interested in the industry and want to keep up to date, even though it's not my day-to-day job. But I also then turn around and say, okay, I'm going to follow people who write about Microsoft Purview who aren't necessarily writing about e-discovery,
Right.
right? Because I need to know how this stuff works.
Yep.
And I think even if, in my role, absolutely, this is my job. I need to know how this stuff works. But I think even from the e-discovery point of view, because I am constantly looking at this and going, this seems like something that if when I worked at eDiscovery, I would have been like, not my thing. I wouldn't have paid attention to it. But now I'm looking at it and going, this really kind of impacts what's available to you at eDiscovery. Like you might want to know about this.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. And so it's breaking down that long-standing tradition of I don't need to know about that stuff. Print those
Yeah.
emails out for me, right? That sort
Yeah.
of thing.
Yeah. But yeah, so and I think what's happening with AI um is that a lot of stuff is becoming less document focused. There are a lot of things that are becoming, and teams sort of started down this path. I think it pushed a lot of people down that path. You don't have a lot of, you are taking things out of email and putting it into channels and Teams chats. And so you have this sort of, it's not important enough to email. I could just send off a quick chat. Um, and then you get into, well, is that a business record or is that not a business record?
Yeah,
Right?
what do I do about a litigation hold? Do I have to get that? Is it already gone?
Yeah,
You know,
and that again is where you have to understand what the IT department has done in terms of records
yes,
management, retention policies, various other security policies they've got in place. Because, as you said, where I work, we consider chat to be ephemeral. We don't keep it. Keep it for a couple of days and then it's gone. So if you're kind of hanging on that litigation hold for a couple of weeks, it's gone.
yeah,
Stuff is long gone.
it's way gone. Not something you want to say to the other side or to the judge.
Nope.
You know,
No,
we
no.
don't have that anymore. Why don't you have it anymore? Well, I don't really know. We just don't have
Yeah.
it. Yeah,
Yeah, and that's, and so then when you add, and that was always complicated. I never really, I felt like for the most part, we kind of got used to that a little bit in eDiscovery, but never like there was never fully embraced the concept of there's stuff all over the place now because Teams is just pulling it from different
yeah.
locations.
I think my take is it's just now that there's just so much more stuff. Teams
Yeah.
has become more widespread, um, collaboration, um, and it's just a lot of stuff, man. as
No, there
George,
is.
as George Carlin would say, we
Yeah.
got too much stuff.
It's a lot of stuff. And I think one of the interesting things also is I used to think about like doing a custodian interview where they would say, "Oh, I saw this thing here, but is that really where you can collect it?" Right.
Yeah, yeah, I saw this thing here. Is it still there?
Yeah,
Did it
is it
go
still
someplace
there? And
else? Yeah.
and the interesting thing about really digging into how CoPilot works is it's very similar. Greg referenced like the artifacts that get created just from a meeting recap.
Yes.
Right. Again, I saw it in the meeting, but from
But
an e-discovery perspective,
where did it
how do I
go?
collect that? Where is it?
Yeah. Who's got that?
Um, yeah, and I think it's really interesting, and one of the things that I've been looking at a lot lately, part because I think it's relevant to this, part because again, it's part of my job. We are always looking at collaboration tools, and part because at ILTACon I'm going to be doing a demo of this particular tool uh, on Thursday afternoon for those of you who are hanging around for the entire week. But um, is Microsoft Loop. Right. Microsoft Loop is one of those tools that I think is really hard to explain to people how it works. And the reason that I say that is because when I tell people, oh, you should look at Loop, they immediately go to their start menu and they can't find it because it's not actually there. Right. It's in the web and you get through it from there. But I also like to point out to people that there's a really good chance that if you are living in the M365 environment, you're already using it. You just don't know it yet because much like Teams, there are aspects of Loop that are being used when you use AI. So, for example, if I'm running,
Give us a
if
fair example here.
so for example, if I am using Copilot, or one of the more recent features that they've added is when you get a response from Copilot, so you ask Copilot to write a document for you, a draft of a document, and then there'll be a little button at the bottom that says Edit in Pages, right, which allows you to save that response into a page that is editable. You can share it with other people. You can all edit it, collaborate on that response, and change it and update it. correct any hallucinations. Not that those ever happen.
No,
Uh,
no, no, no. We don't even want to go there.
but right now I've got a page that I can go in and edit and update and then eventually share out with other people and they can update that. Right. That page is a loop page. Right. It's not a Word document. It's not in OneNote. It's literally on the back end a dot loop file.
A what file?
Dot loop. Dot
Oh, a doc.
LOOP.
Right.
Right. Um, and you can move that thing around. You can put it in various loop workspaces. You can copy it into a Teams chat, into an email. Like you can do all these different things with it. And it's a very, from an end user perspective, I think it is absolutely fascinating the way that I can use Loop, right?
But
Because I could take that Loop page, the contents of it, I could put it in an email to you. You can get that email. I can go back to the Loop page and edit it, and the edits will appear in your email.
no, it's like quantum mechanics. Um,
Yeah.
so, um, oh man, that's just no way. No way.
Yeah. And again, as an end user, as someone who has to write documentation, that appeals to me so much as an eDiscovery person explaining to an attorney how that happened. My
So
hat's off to
let's
all of
let's
you.
say the very first time you save it as a loop page, where is it?
Exactly.
Right?
Where
And
is it?
and if I send it in an email, is it considered an attachment to the email? This is like the links argument on steroids, right?
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
oh, oh, how do I provide that if I'm producing the email? Where's that loop? And and much like subatomic particles that act differently when they're looked at, you're telling me I can change that simply by going to it and change it
Yeah. It's an editable file, and when you edit it, it changes in every location where you
in every
copy it because
location.
essentially what it is it's one file, and you are much like if I wrote an email and had HTML that said go out to this website and load this image, right? I don't actually have the image in the email. I just have the link to the website that pulls it in. And if I go to the website and change that image and you open that email, you get a different image, right? Because it's pulling it in every time you open it.
So
That's
this has
essentially
got
what's
some
happening with Loop.
parallel universe link to the loop file.
Yeah. So every time you open it, it refreshes that content, pulls it into your email. And so from an e-discovery perspective, right, if I load that email into Relativity, that content isn't there.
What happens if you what happens if you put it on a hold in Purview? You know?
That is the million-dollar mystery question, to be honest with you, because the location, and I think Greg kind of mentioned like some of the stuff lives in Azure and there's not really a location. And some of so Microsoft has created this thing called SharePoint Embedded.
Okay.
And SharePoint Embedded can be is used by CoPilot, it's used by Loop, it's used by CoPilot agents if you do custom agents. If you build your own software applications, you can store data in SharePoint Embedded. Now, in my testing in the Discovery platform, I can go pull that stuff out of SharePoint Embedded using keyword searches and things like that. Um, what's interesting though is that the path, so it'll have the file path and the metadata, is a path that you can't browse to. So I cannot go out to that path and look at the file
And
because it's in this SharePoint embedded world
and so
where I have to own it.
to answer my facetious question from a moment ago, so where is it?
It is in a SharePoint embedded container, which
Okay.
has a long GUID name and no control over any of that. And you see it in the apps, right? That's where I see it as a user. But as a discovery person, what I'm doing is saying, okay, I need to find a keyword for it. And then I've got to search for those keywords across the entire environment, which in large corporations is going to be a problem. And it's one of the things that I look at, and I think I've worked with large corporations. They are loath to run things across the entire environment.
Oh yeah. So when you say that it I can make a change and it'll change the other versions or copies, whatever they are that have been put out there, like just using the one in the email as an example. What if I had downloaded that to my hard drive?
Then you've made a copy of it, right? So that is a true copy at that point. So If you have taken that loop file and printed it to PDF or copied it into a Word document, that's a totally different document now.
But can I put the loop file on my hard drive?
No,
I cannot.
I mean, you
So,
can, but what you're going to get back is not readable.
and so the loop files are in the looperverse, and we get a whole new
It's a good term for it.
we get a whole new thing here, the
Yeah.
looperverse. Like you seen
Yeah,
that
and
movie?
the
You seen that
reason it
movie
won't be
Looper? The Loopers,
I do
right?
remember that.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. If I change something on the guy now, it changes him like 50 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Which is actually,
and
did you read the article the other day about they did some new testing? They've been working on this. They being, I don't even know who the scientists are who work on this. I hesitate to guess who they are. But entangled particles, and they literally entangled particles are basically what you described. They're looper particles in the subatomic particle world, where you can, because they're entangled with each other through some mysterious process that not only do I not understand, but Albert Einstein once described as spooky action at a distance. That phrase has always stuck with me. Like that was his scientific example for it. But if you have these entangled particles and one is on Earth and one is on Pluto, whatever you do to the one on Earth changes the one on Pluto or in the Andromeda galaxy. And now they're beginning to see that it may even be at different times. So the whole concept of parallel universes, right?
you're blowing my mind right now.
Right? Look it up, man. It's like
All right.
they don't even like to talk about this stuff because it's so friggin' scary. Entangled particles, but they are apparently somehow at the basis of quantum physics and ultimately quantum computers, which will obviously put us out of business. You and I,
Yeah.
or at least
Yeah.
me. I'm not going to take the time to even try to figure that stuff out.
No, I'm done
I
with
got
that one.
lost when they put letters in with numbers in high school algebra. That was it. I was done.
Yeah.
I was done.
Yeah, that's fair.
But it
No,
sounds
but
eerily like what you're describing with
yeah,
Loop.
and I was going to say that the reason that if you went into Loop and said, "Oh, I'm going to download this as a .loop file," that it wouldn't work is because Loop is completely dependent on the permissions you have in M365. So when you take it out of that environment, it no longer can verify who you are. It will not show you the document. It'll show you gobbledygook. Now, the good news, if you are using the Microsoft eDiscovery tools in Purview, and you are running your keyword searches and it collects a loop file on when you export it out, it will convert it to PDF for you, and you will not have this problem with permissions.
It automatically converts it to PDF.
Yes.
Oh, interesting. And stores it locally
Yeah. So
wherever
when
you
you're
do
doing
it.
your export out of your review set, it says here's a PDF version of that. So we're kind of stripping that whole permissions
And
basis. And
Purview will go hold that.
now the hold part I'm not sure about because
Yeah, because
the hold,
you see what the problem is.
yeah, the holds that are based on locations are going to have an issue because this isn't really a location. All right. So in a lot of ways, I think what people are going to have to do is either place a hold on keyword documents across the environment, which seems like a horrible idea. Or the other thing that I think about is something that we used to talk a lot about with teams is do a collect to preserve,
Yes.
where you run the collection, put it in a review set, and say we're just going to keep that right there.
Yeah. This is going over here. That's what's going to happen. That's what I was just
Yeah,
going to say. Is you're going to need some better document management policies for teams. Uh,
absolutely.
well,
But that is an example, and as confusing as it was.
yeah.
But I think that's an example of, this is a feature in Microsoft. This is how CoPilot is interacting with Loop, and Loop is interacting with Outlook and Teams and all of these things. Um, that from a discovery perspective, right? So as Greg was talking about, right, if you work in a legal department, probably not paying attention to much of that stuff.
Oh no,
Not in detail.
no, probably about it. absolutely
Yeah.
not
I
paying
mean, you just
attention.
don't have time, right? You're working, you're running keyword searches against review sets and running productions. Like you don't have time to do this. And that's where, like I said, I think I'm in a very privileged position of being able to focus on what's actually happening in the Microsoft world and then spend a little bit of time sort of translating that for eDiscovery. But again, most of my reading and social media following is now really focused on Microsoft. It's really
Yeah,
looking at the people who are Microsoft MVPs, who work for Purview Consulting, who do Microsoft M365 security, because it's understanding it's understanding that entire platform and the infrastructure that gives me the ability to look at it from the eDiscovery side and say, okay, this lives in SharePoint embedded. What does that mean?
this
Right? How do
this
I collect from SharePoint embedded?
yeah, I was just going to say, in my mind, what I'm thinking of now is this brings up a whole new list of questions that requesting parties can ask of producing parties. Where did you get this? How did you get this? How do you know where it was? Did you do this? Just ask the question. Were any documents stored in Loop? And sit back and wait for them to all go, what? What's he talking?
What? Yeah. No, it's absolutely an
Wow.
interesting way to look at it. And I think it does. I think Microsoft and like I said, you mentioned it, right? It changes. It changes so often. And I know that let me just say this from my heart to your entire audience. If they're trying to follow along with Microsoft changes and it seems massively overwhelming and never ending, I
Yeah,
feel you.
it is.
I feel it. I live
Yeah.
it. I am there too. There are days where I'm just like, will you freaking stop
Just
for a
stop.
week?
Stop.
Let me catch up.
Yeah. It is. It is often almost overwhelming. All right. Well. Thanks for putting our mind at ease, Mike. You've
Yeah, no problem. No, I do think, like I said, one of the things that I do want to encourage people to do, as Greg said, is just get in there and test it. Um, Not only just have like your standard, this is typically what my search is going to do, but also keep an eye on new features, go use the new feature, and then run the eDiscovery test against the new features, right? Create a loop file with a keyword in it and then run a
yeah,
tenant-wide search and see where it is,
yeah,
right? And
yeah,
think about how you're going to collect it and think about not just how you're going to collect it, but look at the metadata and the various things that you can search by so that you aren't collecting the world, right? When you do that, you're specifically looking for certain types of things.
yeah,
Copilot interactions, like Greg talked about, like if you run a keyword search, you're going to get all these little artifacts, but you could limit that to just the Copilot interaction, right? Which is the prompt and response. You don't have to have everything that comes back.
right,
So
right.
there are ways to run those queries inside of the discovery tools that limit it, that allow you to kind of collect just what you're looking for, but it does take time to learn it and it does change. The new
And
interface
yeah.
changed how you run searches and yeah.
So, any sense of when this will be ubiquitous? When Copilot will be the common interface? I mean, obviously, we're in a transition period now. Are we a year away? Less?
I, I,
Or
I it's hard for me to say. I think the fact that you go to office.com now and it takes you to Copilot it, into a prompt box is, it's a
yeah,
pretty good tell that Microsoft thinks we're there. Um, are we there? No, I don't think so. Um,
but are we
but
close
I
to
think it's
there?
but I think it's where they're headed, right? That's
Oh
what
yeah,
they
no
want.
question where it's headed.
And I think they envision a world where we are not opening Word and starting a blank document. We are literally opening a Copilot prompt that says, "What kind of Word document do you want to create?"
What do you want to do? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Good. Doesn't even
And
have to be a what build me a video.
Mhm.
Give me a chart. I asked
Build
this
me a
morning.
video, give me a chart.
I
I
asked
make
this morning
PowerPoint
for
slides with it. It's great.
yeah. I was reading some of the political stuff that was going on. I said to Copilot, give me a chart of the tax structure of the United States since 1900, and by decade. I said, just give it to me by decade, but tell me what the tax breaks were, the tax rates were, but give me a chart so I can look at a flow chart. I don't want 10 pages of exposition. And 5 minutes later, bang.
Yeah. It's
So
really it does some amazing things. I was testing something out with their what they call the researcher agent, which is really just, OpenAI calls it deep thinking or deep research, whatever it is, same kind of tool. And I
some of
basically
us call it
said,
some of us call it Skynet, right?
yeah, it really was. It was very, I was like, here's my website. Here's the newsletter I write. Like, here's the link to it. Go analyze the content and develop a social media marketing strategy for me.
Yep.
And
Yep.
it did. It gave me a 20-page social media strategy with details and
Yep.
plans. And I was like, wow. I mean, it took 15 minutes to get it back using the deep thinking model, but I was like, that's
But I didn't pay ten
not
thousand
bad.
dollars to a marketing company
No,
to take 2 weeks
it's
to get
not.
it back to me, right?
Yeah, it's not bad. Like, it's not perfect. It's not
No,
the
no, no.
greatest marketing plan I've ever seen, but it's not bad.
But it's a start. That's the thing.
Yeah.
That's what I see so much of this is don't think of it as the end all and be all. You shouldn't be your end, but it opens up different avenues of thought and gives you a skeleton to hang stuff on, a fresh a structure, an outline, whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like having a really smart companion there to answer questions for you. Tom, that reminds me of some of the questions that Gail and I used to have. Like, what do you think about this? Well, have you tried this? What about that? You're bouncing ideas off the wall, except it's a it's a Microsoft
It's an
wall.
AI. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, unbelievable. Okay, and I want to repeat again, in case anybody didn't catch it. You will be at ILTACon in what? That's about 5 weeks now. We're getting close.
Yeah. It's getting close.
August 5th, 6th, something like that. I don't know.
Uh,
You can look it
it's the
up.
second week of August, I
Yeah,
think.
use AI and look it up.
Yeah. It's
The second
go to
week of
Ilticon.
August
Look it up.
in National Harbor, just outside of Washington, D.C. Mike will be talking on Thursday about Loop. And trust me, if you're in National Harbor on Thursday afternoon, you should probably, from what I just heard, you should probably go listen to this presentation.
But if you're not there on Thursday, come find me.
But yeah, fine. Mike and I will be huddled over in a corner someplace, feverishly taking notes.
Trying.
Well, thanks so much for the time, Mike. This is great. It gives us a lot. Oh, I'm sorry. One last thing, though. What's this going to cost small, medium-sized firms? I think I know the answer to this, but yeah,
That, yeah. So the CoPilot itself, right? The free version of CoPilot that you get just from being an M365 customer is pretty decent in terms of being an AI tool. The difference, right, between the paid version and the free version is the data that it can access.
right.
Free version, you only get access to public available data. It's not going to reach into your email, read any of your documents. Can't do that. That's going to be your paid version. And for that, you're talking $30 a month per user.
So it's the same as the Office 360, the old Office 365, for example, so far.
Yeah. So, and one of the interesting things, and I've talked about this with some of our lawyers, is like, look, $30 a month for a lawyer. Yeah, if you're billing $300 an hour and I save you 6 minutes a month, it pays for itself, right?
Yeah. And
But
I'm sure there's licensing, right? There's not industry. What's the phrase I'm looking for? So, a firm could buy a license for their users, I presume. Um, but where does that work with? Now we've got Microsoft 365 at my E3, at my E5, to give me top level purview. I mean, is that still
yeah, it starts to
TBD?
get it starts to get a lot because it sort of you end up buying multiple licenses just to kind of work in the environment and use all the tools in the environment. So, and I know people have complained about this for years and years and years. It's not going anywhere. I don't even bother complaining about it anymore. But yeah, so you're paying for an E3 or an E5 license to start with per user, right? Every user who has that license gets, either like the E3 is 30 something a month, the E5 is 50 something a month per
Enter,
user.
Enterprise licensing. That's what
Yes, enterprise
I
licensing.
was
Um,
struggling to find.
they They last year separated out Teams as a separate license, so you're going to pay $9 a user for Teams. They did that for Europe because Slack was suing them for being a monopoly. So the Europeans came down and said you can't bundle Teams with M365 anymore, and they were like, "Great, here you go. Here's two separate
Okay,
licenses."
here's your
And
bill.
of course, it came out as more expensive than it was
Of
before
course,
because,
of course.
I mean, why not? Uh, so yeah,
Uh,
just that basic bundle, and then you've got various premium versions of all of these licenses that give you extra stuff.
so that's still to be
So
played out, right?
yeah, so you're easily getting into the tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars for mid-sized businesses, and it's an investment.
What if you're a five attorney firm? Just go
If
with
you're a
five
five attorney
single
firm,
licenses.
yeah, you get five licenses. You're paying probably, by the time all those things add up, maybe $500 a month for probably 100 per user.
Yeah, right. Which is probably what you're paying for Lexus or Westlaw, right?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
and again,
it's affordable.
yeah, it's not terribly expensive. It adds up quickly. Um, if you start getting more users, so every time you hire someone, you've got to think about
Yeah,
that,
yeah,
that expense of need another license here, right?
yep,
It's not just the desk you're paying for.
yep, yep.
It's the licensing of another user.
And it's another loop to keep track of.
Yeah, another user you got to keep track of, another storage, right? And then of course you with your licenses you get a certain amount of storage. If you go over that, then you start paying for storage, which in mid-sized law firms not so much of an issue because most of them don't store a lot of data in Microsoft because they have NetDocs, iManage, like that's the document management system, not necessarily Microsoft, but
Yeah,
if you start recording a lot of your meetings and not having a retention policy that deletes some of those recordings occasionally, it can start to add up.
you got text messaging, chat messaging. Yeah, no, I get it. I get it. There's, like I said, you got too much stuff, man.
Yeah, and that's ultimately why there's someone who's in charge of monitoring that whole thing
Yeah,
and keeping track of all of it. I'm lucky; I don't have to keep track of all of it. I just have to keep track of certain parts of it. We've divided it up in our.
okay, which makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, well, great. Thanks. Thanks for taking the time, Mike. This is. I see headaches in my future. I see many headaches in my future.
And find the people who know the Microsoft side of it. Like
Yes,
that's my advice to you and everybody on the eDiscovery side is find the people who understand the Microsoft side of it and can educate you and are sharing content and writing about
yeah,
whether they're talking about eDiscovery or not. There's the ones that are
yeah.
talking
Just
about
just keep on top of it.
CoPilot and Loop and
Yep,
Microsoft administration and security because you'll learn a lot.
gotcha. All right. Well, thanks a lot, and look forward to seeing you in a few weeks in National Harbor.
Yeah, stay cool down there. It's a little warm down here this time of year.
Oh yeah. All right, Mike. Thanks a lot.
Yep.